G'day and welcome. I'm coming towards the end of my bachelor degree at the University of South Australia. I wanted to go over some of my first year work to show you what it's like, what's some of the stuff that you're going to be doing if you're thinking about studying architecture. Rather than me just explaining this is what you do in first year, why not show you exactly what it is that I do. And I've got to apologize, I don't have my proper setup, so I don't have my proper microphone or the lights or anything because they're currently in a studio. I'm doing some filming for a documentary coming up that will be later this year, A Day in the Life of an Architect. I'm going around to a couple of firms and doing some filming. The filming I've done so far has been incredible. I've been on a couple of client meetings and some site visits, and overall it's just been such a good experience. I'm super excited to share that with you guys, but that's why my microphone's not here, that's why my proper camera setup's not here, but we'll make do with what we've got, and I'll show you some of my first year work. So I think we should dive in and just go from first assignments and go all the way to the end of my year. So yeah, let's get into it. I don't actually remember what I did in my first year, so I don't really remember what I've done. I don't really remember the grades I got, but perhaps I can bring them up as well and show you exactly what grade I got. Why not? I like being transparent with you guys. I'm currently digging into all of my old files, so I'm getting a throwback to memory lane. This was over 2 years ago, as yes, I'm coming towards the end of my third year. Architecture year 1, semester 1. Let's dig in. So I've just had a look. I don't have all of my work in hard copy from the first semester, but I should have some screenshots and stuff. So first semester, first studio, this is a bit of a throwback. I remember I was pretty sick throughout the entire semester and I had to get an extension on a few things, but I think I had tonsillitis in first year or first semester, and I remember not being able to rock up on one of the presentation days because I just felt so shit, but I got an extension for that and presented a couple of days later, or they marked it online, I think it was. So the first assessment of studio involved a lot of hand drawing. I'll put up some images of the work I did. Really it was just about getting some quick sketches done, some single line drawings where we would just do go outside, look at the buildings on the campus and just do some observational drawings. Really just getting us comfortable with architectural sketching. We then had to compose these onto a sheet and kind of think about using white space and or negative space they call it, and just making it look like it's architectural. And I think this was a really good first assessment because it got us just comfortable with sketching and getting our ideas down without thinking that we're doing something wrong, or even if we are doing something wrong, just to go through with it and just get stuff down. This first assessment didn't just involve sketching, it also had a mapping and an abstract portion of the assessment as well, and I'll show you the mapping stuff. That's this here. This is what I did. I thought, hell, why not? I just did some mapping throughout one of the buildings on the campus, showing kind of the paths you can take and what the different areas are. Looking at the activity, as you can see, this is nothing special. I think this was just to get us comfortable with, analyzing a site and going around a building with a sketchbook, just getting comfortable, just drawing while people are walking past. And the abstract part was just to pick an abstract drawing we've done, I guess, of the building on campus, and then just to add our name in there. Really, this was just me ticking the box, because abstract stuff, anything goes. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong, it's abstract. Alright, cool. So assessment 2 for Studio 1, so this is still in my first semester. Studio 1, that was our first project, the mapping, abstract and the observational drawing. They were all a part of that first submission, which was probably maybe 15 to 20% of the grade. Moving on, we have this assessment 2, which was space, and it was our first time really creating drawings that were orthographic, meaning they're to scale. So this is the first time we're drawing to scale plans and drawings. We're drawing axonometrics for the first time. The first studio involved a lot of perspective drawing and learning how to draw, and we had a lot of workshops on that. And so where we had to create these orthographic drawings, this was my first time drawing a section. It's not fantastic, I'll be real. This is my first time drawing an elevation as well. I think I did pretty well for these drawings, considering this is my first time doing anything like this. And the first studio was a lot of work, and we had a lot of other stuff going on as well. It wasn't just studio, we had 2 other subjects, but we weren't just doing drawings for this assignment as well. We had to create these axonometric drawings, these things here. We had to create these in scale models as well. Just little, I think they were 10 by 10 centimeter cubes, and then we'd kind of make extrusions and cut things and add things and make it all different. They really did like my little models. They were really clean, and my drawings were also really clean. They mentioned my plan wasn't great, and they told me that. I do not blame them looking back at that. That is probably the most illegible, unreadable thing that I've ever seen. But hey, that's what you do in first year. You just create stuff and see what happens, because you have no idea what's going on. I also created a little model. I wonder if I've still got that. Doesn't look like it. I think I might have stepped on this model on purpose, because that's kind of what you do after you finish assignment. Wish I hadn't though. I really wish I hadn't. I do have pictures of it, so this here is my model. It was pretty clean. It was a pretty good model, pretty abstract though. There's no sight to it, there's no context. It's just kind of weird fence in the way as well. But so moving on, the third and final assessment of Studio. This was the big one, worth about 60%. So then that would mean the other one was about 30% from what I remember. It might have been 20, 30, 50. I think that's how it worked. So this was the big assessment, 50%. I don't have the model of this anymore either. I wish I had, or I don't even have the thing of it, because I didn't go back in time to pick it up. They chucked it out, which was unfortunate, but what can you do? This was the first time I've drawn a perspective as well. I think that turned out pretty well. The plan looks a lot better than my last plan that I did. The elevation, this was interesting. I actually first drew it like it was a perspective. And then I had to try and change that, because in the last week they said, oh, this is a perspective, this isn't an elevation. And so I was like, oh shit, I've got to make some changes. It somehow made it look like a little bit more like an elevation, but you can still see it's got some depth to it, which it isn't supposed to have. I was a bit confused as to what an elevation actually is. The section's not too bad actually. Could just have some hierarchy on the lines, and you know, for a first year student, I'm happy with that. The actual composition of the sheet, because it's all hand drawn, it looks terrible. I've put 2 pieces of A3, just some good high GSM card, I guess. I've stuck that with a glue stick onto like a piece of cardboard that's all warped and shitty, and then I've, yeah, hand drawn some of these things, like where it says perspective. It's just not neat at all. It's not lined up. And that was the biggest piece of feedback I got from this, was just to take some care in the actual layout. So that's something I took away from this studio. They mentioned my drawings were good. My model was really good. And they helped me in class with that. But yeah, just ultimately spending the time to have a good composition of your drawings and your sheet. Have it planned. Don't just kind of chuck stuff on in the last minute. So that was my first studio finished. As you can see, it's quite a lot of work. That was, I guess, in the matter of 14 weeks. It was 14 weeks. You have a 7 weeks on, and then you have a 2-week break, and then you've got another 7 weeks. For that first studio, I got a credit, which is, I think, 65 to 74%. It's the one below a distinction and one above the passes. So, you know, I was pretty happy with that, considering I was sick for most of that semester. I still took a lot away from that, and it was quite an enjoyable semester. During that semester though, I also had 2 other subjects, which was design construction principles and also design culture and environment. And let's look at design construction principles first. DCP, we call that. I really wish I had spent more time on this subject. As you can see, there's a lot of studio work, so I spent most of my time on studio and didn't spend a whole lot of time on this construction course, and I regret that, because you know, we really need to know construction as students. This course had a focus on residential timber construction, I guess, which is really common here in Australia. It was really a course on the construction of timber structure. And as I was saying, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on this course. I think I just passed it. That's with regret. I wish I had spent some more time on it, because the stuff you learn in it is really helpful, and I'll constantly come back to it even today. Really what this involved was coming to class each week, doing, I guess, a little tutorial exercise in class for an hour, and then to implement these into a big project where we have to actually design and think about the structure of a timber pavilion. Yep, as I said, didn't go too well. We got the pass, never failed anything in university, but we got the pass, and I was happy with that, because I didn't care too much about it, unfortunately, but that's the way she goes. Design, culture, and environment. This was also another one where I didn't really enjoy it. It involved essay writing, and Whereas some people do enjoy writing essays and doing some academic work, it's not really my cup of tea. I'd rather be doing studio, be doing hands-on stuff, construction stuff, documentation, stuff like that. Don't really enjoy writing essays and abstracts and nah. However, saying that, I'm actually quite good at it, and I ended up getting a distinction for my essay and a distinction for design, culture and environment, which I'm not really happy about. Like, it's not something I'm like, yes, I'm really good at academic writing, because I feel like it doesn't really have a place in architecture. This kind of just stemmed from me doing year 11 and 12 English in high school. Like, yes, it's great, I can write essays and do all that kind of academic work, but I just don't really enjoy it at all, and it's not something I'm proud of and something I can show. I'd rather do a big studio project and show my work and show something I've created with my hands. There you have it. That's the first semester of my first year of university finished. The next semester was a bit more interesting, and I've got a lot more of that work around me now, so I can show you what that is. This next semester was my better semester of the first year. I did really well in studio. I did pretty well in the other subjects as well, I've got to say. And when I say I did pretty well, I don't always mean I got a good grade. It's more about what you take away from the subject. As I say quite a lot, your grades really don't matter. It's more about what you can take away from the work you've been doing, and if you actually put in 100% and you've learned as much as you can and just use the resources you've been given. So saying that, let's dig into some of my second semester work of the first year. We'll look at studio first because it's the most interesting. Assessment 1 was my god, it was a mess. It was a group project, so that's usually the way studio starts. You usually start with a group project that leads into individual work. You sometimes just gotta fight through that group work, because especially in first year, you don't know a lot of the people. You can get grouped up with some people that really don't care about their degree or what they're doing, the work they do. It's also a good opportunity to try and manage these people and try and encourage teamwork and encourage people so that they want to do good. For me, I found this was a really difficult first project. One of our people just didn't show up the entire semester, and then another bloke went missing in action the whole semester, and it was pretty much just me and Nick, who's now dropped out of architecture, but we kind of just worked on this whole thing ourselves, and it was just a mess. I spent hours and hours and hours putting into this assessment, and because we got marked as a group, those hours just didn't really show in the grade I got. Let me show you what I was talking about. So this was doing vernacular drawing, which is kind of documenting in drawing a certain site, and we looked at Tatham Street here in Adelaide. Pretty much I've just drawn this hand-drawn kind of streetscape, which I did 2 sheets of the street, and then 3 other people did 6 more sheets. So we had this whole line of just drawings, which I'll put on the screen here. And I remember spending maybe 40 hours on that drawing, and some of the other people just spent a couple of hours, and it's a bit disheartening when that happens in a group project, but it's also like, how can you encourage them to do a bit better? How can you just cop it and just move on, because that's kind of what you got to do. So after that disaster, we moved on to assessment 2, which I got to remind myself what that was. We worked in a pair to come up with a concept for a specific person, and this was our first time really coming up with a concept for, you know, an actual client, I guess, and it involved orthographic drawing. It involved using a bit of technology for the first time, although whereas this wasn't a requirement, this is something that we decided to throw in just because that's something we were interested in. And so we had to come up with a metaphor and conceptualization for a celebrity chef. The idea of the project was to be a suspended dwelling off of this existing buildings that we've already documented. And so this is something that was fluent across all of my studios, is that the site usually remains the same across the whole semester for the whole studio course, but you'll have different projects, usually 2 or 3 different projects that you'll do on that site. So we've documented the entire thing in these vernacular drawings. We've done the whole street. And then we're picking a small part of that site and we're hanging the suspended dwelling off of it. I decided to go with a Michelin star concept for the celebrity chef. The Michelin star is the highest award to earn as a chef, and this is what this celebrity chef has earned, so why not showcase this to all of Adelaide in the building that he temporarily dwells in, which is his kind of holiday home, and it still acts as a private living space. They really liked this concept and this idea. I feel like if you're ever doing a studio project, to have a good metaphor or a good concept is gonna kind of get the attention of the tutors, and they quite like that. What's here? A couple of plans and sections, just doing some diagramming. Bit of trace paper. Now this was mainly meant to be about hand sketching again. Being the first year of studio, has mainly had this idea of hand sketching, hand drawing, no computer technology. But they didn't discourage technology, so I decided to get into SketchUp. No one else was really in SketchUp or using any programs, and so it kind of made my design stand out. For this second project, it was still in pairs, and so whereas I had my idea of this Michelin star, my partner had a whole completely different idea, and that was okay. That was the aim. We weren't meant to be working on the same idea, but just to present them the same and then kind of collaborate to come up with them. Again, my partner didn't really do much in that. He kind of messaged me in the last 2 nights and was like, hey, how you going with your project? Can you have a look at mine? And I was like, sure, I've got a lot to do, but that's what you do in first year. And so I did pretty well with that second project. I think that was a distinction. So moving on then, the final assignment of studio. This is the one I did the best in for the whole year. This was the 60%er. This was my most enjoyable assessment of the first year. It was just moving on from this same concept to take the feedback we had received and then make some changes, make it a bit better. And that's when I came up with this poster, and I was really happy with this presentation. It turned out really well. Ended up getting a high distinction for it, which is the best grade you can get. Super stoked with that. More so, it's the knowledge I took away from this semester, working so closely with my tutors, because I saw I was really interested and I was one of the more motivated students regarding this whole studio. They spent a lot of time with me, and I spent a lot of time with my tutor, Amy, who kind of took me under her wing and spent a lot more time with me than other students during studio, because she saw how keen I was. I really tried to just figure out what it was that they were wanting from the assignment and then kind of implement that. My actual presentation was probably what did it for me, because I had a bit of animation in there, and my presentation was really kind of seamlessly integrated. But yeah, really happy with how this turned out. This was a big step up from my first studio, where I didn't even have a proper layout and I kind of just threw pieces of paper on top of it and it looked like shite. I also had a model for this as well. The model was apparently one of the cleanest models they've seen from a first year student. I was like, wow, this took me like 2 hours to do. I was like, thank you. I didn't say that. I was like, yeah, this took me so much time. But it was a pretty clean model, and hopefully have some photos of that. But I think that's also where people go wrong. I think people think that the presentation doesn't matter, so they'll spend all this time putting their thoughts and ideas together, and then they kind of forget about presenting. They come up with their notes on the day of submission and they prepare their speech as they're waiting to present, and I think that's probably a bad thing to do. I think you should really spend a day or two really, creating a good speech, because if you can't convey your thoughts and ideas about your project, then all that work you've done is pretty much useless. And that's what it's about being an architect, to have a fluent and consistent way of presenting that is effective. You need to be able to present your thoughts, otherwise people won't understand what you're saying and you can't sell your services. So yeah, I think that's important to know. Let's move on to our next subject, our next course, which was architectural documentation. This was quite interesting actually. I friggin' loved this course. I got to spend a lot of time with an actual architect who runs his own firm, who was my tutor, and every day we'd come into class and he would just sit down for an hour and just talk about the realities of being an architect and kind of the things that you need to know and the things you need to do. And then he also went into, architectural detailing and how to do documentation drawings and so forth. I think what really made it good was that I had this connection with my teacher, which just really made me keen on showing up, and I was really excited to be at university and to hear and learn from this person who's got real experiences and who's in the real world doing that stuff, because he wasn't just talking about architecture. He was talking about, how to have good body language that people like to listen to you and, shows you're a good listener. And he's giving a whole lot of tips on, how to have a good project, which I've also implemented in some of my videos and stuff. So I'm kind of recalled what he was saying to me in first year because it stuck with me this whole time. So for this course, what we actually had to do though was document a building that was already existing and make some changes to it to detail up how it would actually be built. That's why it's called architectural documentation. But the interesting thing was that it was all hand drawn, so we couldn't use any technology. But I actually quite like this because it helped me kind of understand how drafting works. You know, before getting into actual software, trying to draft and that, which just makes it all so much more confusing. It was good just to, although not the most efficient way to draft, doing it hand drawn, because when you have to make a change, you have to get a new layer of trace and just restart the drawing. Doing that really helped you understand what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, and then it helps you refine your drawings, and it's a lot better to understand what it is and why you're doing things. So whereas I learned a lot about documentation in this, I think that other stuff that my tutor would share with us each week was just the most valuable thing I could have learned from university, and I'm super glad I got to have Greg Bond as my tutor. I actually then took that opportunity of having this real architect, and after the course had finished, I went into his office during the holidays and asked him for some part-time work, and he offered me a 2-week work experience placement kind of thing, and I got to spend some more time with him and learn what it's like inside the profession. So that was my first experience inside an architectural firm. So I think that's also a good idea for you guys to take those opportunities. If there's a working architect who's your tutor, then you should probably try and build a good connection with them, and then, you know, take that as a opportunity and make the most of that opportunity. Use that as a way to network and get experience and all that good stuff. And with this documentation course, it kind of dragged on from the design construction principles from the first year. It had a lot to do with timber framing and actual kind of 1-bedroom studio double height building. And after I realized I didn't spend that much effort on that first DCP course, I decided to spend a lot more time on this, and then to go back to that first semester course, and I had to, you know, kind of do double time work on that because I had missed so much from that first semester. So last but not least, my last course for my first year of architecture was architecture and environment. Architecture and environment had this focus on passive design, sustainable design, something I had a bit of a passion in since my year 12 research project in high school was about sustainable, or designing a sustainable beach home. So this is something I had a bit of a passion for, something I still do. I think if you don't know how to design passively so that you utilize the sun's resources, wind and cross ventilation, all that good stuff, if you don't know how to use that in your designs, you're missing out on not only just a massive factor of saving and reducing costs of the building over time, but it's good for the environment, and, you know, not using those things is just a waste because they're free. So this started out with another pair assignment actually of a site analysis. This did not go well either. None of my first projects in first year where we had group assignments really went well. You know, that's probably for a good reason. I now know how to work with people a bit better, and all of my projects since then that have been in groups have been a lot better. So if you struggle with group projects and group assignments and dealing with people, this will get better over time, trust me. So we had to do a site analysis, which was 2 pages of site analysis of a site in the city next to uni. We kind of just did this to tick all the boxes, and then we handed it up being like, we're done. And yes, we got the pass, but it really was nothing special. In fact, the teachers even stated that everyone was kind of just doing this in the last night and did it to get the grade to pass and just tick all the boxes, and then they were done. And she really hoped that the next projects were a bit better than that, and so I spent a bit more time on it and I took that on. And the next assignment was talking about sun shading, and we had to look at a case study and kind of apply changes to it, looking at the sun shading. And we had to make calculations and make changes to the glazing and the location of the windows and consider where the sun's coming from. And, you know, pretty good assignment. I can't really remember this one too much. I think I got a credit for this one, and then the next one was a distinction. The big one was a distinction, so I was happy with that. Okay, so we had to look at the requirements for the Adelaide climate, and then kind of suggest that this building, which is in Seoul in Korea, I believe, or maybe this was in Japan. I can't remember where this building was, but we had to kind of take it from its original location and then consider how it would be best optimized in the Adelaide temperature climate. And so that was kind of just looking at the solar design. Quite interesting. Moving on, the third assignment was passive design, sound and energy. So it wasn't just about, you know, making it better for the environment. We're looking at kind of the qualities of what it would be like to live there. This involved quite a lot of calculations, probably the only time I've used science or maths in architecture school. So it involved, you know, calculating the U value of glazing and kind of heat loss and energy efficiency, stuff like that, conduction loss, looking at how materials and the design affect the qualities of inside the building. Yeah, this was the one that I did pretty well on. Got a distinction for it. I was happy with that. And yeah, that's the end of my first year. It was a really good first year, I would have to say. As you can see, there was a lot of variety to it. It wasn't just working on, you know, drawing, or it wasn't just looking at documentation. There was a really good variety in the stuff I was learning. And so whereas it might seem like it was a lot of work, if you just stay on top of it week to week, you know, there's really not that much to do. In first year, the teachers are all pretty lenient as well, considering you're in your first year of university. Getting extensions is pretty easy. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and you've enjoyed going along this journey of my first year with me. It's been a bit of a throwback and I quite enjoyed going through it. And I'd love to hear from you guys who are already architecture students and you've been through your first year. What was it like for you? And if you're not an architecture student, are you going to go to architecture school soon? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, get some conversations going. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening to me. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.